We will end a brutal regime whose aggression and weapons of mass destruction make it a unique threat to the world. Coalition forces will help maintain law and order so that Iraqis can live in security. We will respect your great religious traditions, whose principles of equality and compassion are essential to Iraq's future. We will help you build a peaceful and representative government that protects the rights of all citizens. And then our military forces will leave.
I don't think the Bush administration has any intention of leaving Iraq. They want permanent U.S. bases there, and they will move them from Saudi Arabia. Now, the flaw in this policy was that they believed that the Iraqis would welcome our bases there. We would be greeted with flowers and candy, was the idea. The Iraqis would be so happy to be rid of Saddam Hussein that they would welcome us with open arms. Well, that's how ignorant of history these people were. I mean, nations don't do that. They may not like their rulers, but they like them a whole lot better than foreign invaders. And I think that's true of any nation.
Does the United States want to maintain permanent bases in Iraq? And I would follow that by asking, are you willing to renounce a claim on permanent bases in Iraq?
Jim, any decisions about permanency in Iraq will be made by the Iraqi government. And frankly, it's not in much of a position to be thinking about what the world's going to look like 5 or 10 years from now. They are working to make sure that we succeed in the short term. And they need our help. And that's where our focus is. But remember, when you're talking about bases and troops, we're dealing with a sovereign government.
Well, it's not up to the Iraqi government. I think the president is being evasive, that being his position. If the question is the simple factual question, are we or are we not building the bases? And if people try to evade the question by saying, I'm not sure what permanent is, you say pouring concrete and welding steel, yes or no. This is a factual question. It's not a question of does the Iraqi government want us to or not. The question is, are we doing it?
I'll be working at the expansion site today.
Today I'll be working on the ramp.
I'll be working AFES today.
Work requires more than 60 airmen from around the Air Force to keep a collective eye on the visiting workers.
Various career fields. We have maintainers, we have air traffic controller, we have crew chief, heavy equipment operators. These are all guys who are all volunteers.
An airbase like this requires a multitude of services to keep it running. Everything from waste collection to haircuts.
Food, services, whatever we need require for the day.
Okay!
Today, a group of Iraqis are working at a construction site on base. That's where Senior Airman Stephen Unruh will spend the next 9 hours.
Have to watch out for them maybe drawing a map of specific locations so they know where to shoot. Watch out for them maybe taking something they're not supposed to, taking uniform items from the trash. If you're on the trash detail, you have to make sure that they don't take stuff they're not supposed to.
A society that has gone through 8 years of war with its neighbor, that has gone through 12 years of sanctions, that has gone through 30 years of a brutal dictatorship, is an easy society to go in and conquer and occupy and impose outside will on. And this is exactly what we have done. We have essentially put the Iraqi society in a meat tenderizer, so to speak, and when it was absolutely weakened and brought to its knees after decades of brutality, of war, of sanctions, we went into that same society and we did as we pleased. We dismantled the infrastructures, we dismantled governmental institutions, we dismantled the military, we dismantled the law enforcement forces, and we let anarchy reign. And in that atmosphere of complete anarchy, we were able to establish our foothold in the region for what I believe will be generations to come.
The best guess, and it's a guess that comes from inadvertent leaks, testimony before Congress, things of this sort. It's very hard to compile this stuff, but that the best guess today is that it's the military itself actually making decisions, that they are concerned by the drift in Iraq, the fact that there is no policy at all on these issues, and have been preparing the ground for possible reconcentration, redeployment of our troops in Iraq, 150,000 of them, now in around 75 bases. Their redeployment down into a small number of concentrated areas away from the civilian population, defensible, and from which, if a full-scale withdrawal from Iraq was ordered, it could be carried out fairly expeditiously.
There were over 100 bases and forward operating bases in Iraq at one point, but they're slowly consolidating them over time. And so now the number is under 55. I think it's 53 or 54. But they're consolidating them down to, it looks now like a minimum number of 6 of these mega bases, a maximum number of probably 12.
So that, let me just say a few words about they keep talking about 4 permanent bases. I believe there are 6. I believe that, and the amounts of money being spent on it are just simply unbelievable. These supplementary appropriations every year in the $75 to $100 billion range, at least half of it is going for base building in Iraq, and is almost totally unsupervised by anybody. The Congress and everybody else simply says this is not on our agenda, we're waiting for the future, et cetera, et cetera. Of the 6 bases, the first, and I think the one that ought to be most obviously mentioned but is close to taboo in the mainstream press, is the new U.S. Embassy. Cost $500 million, supposed to be done next June, June of 2007, being built with imported foreign labor from Asia. Even though there is a continuous electricity shortage in Iraq, there's no shortage of electricity to build this thing. The lights are on around the clock.
One point, when we talk about these lavish bases, these huge, well-fortified bases, and then the embassy, which the same with the embassy, we have apartment buildings, we have the largest swimming pool in the country, we have yoga studios, we have gymnasiums, we have a school for the kids of between the 3,000 and 8,000 government officials that will be working at this embassy.
So there are so many, very clear signs that the Bush administration and the Pentagon and other major players inside the US are planning deliberately, since 2003, have been planning to control Iraq's oil and to keep permanent bases in Iraq. These are facts that Iraqis believe, the majority of Iraqis believe that the US wants to keep permanent bases, that many observers believe, and that the facts on the ground indicate that the US is actually doing this. Permanent bases for what? For 3 exceptions, majorly. Either protecting the US Embassy, which is the biggest embassy in history. It's as big as the Vatican. And by protecting the US Embassy, they mean having troops in the embassy, actually, in the heart of Baghdad, protecting it. Then having troops in the airport, because the, US officials will go to the airport, and then having people on the airport road, which is the most dangerous road on earth. So you are speaking about tens of thousands of troops who will be there under the excuse, protecting diplomats.
We are also, as far as we can tell, it's quite secret and is rarely mentioned, building a base near Erbil in Kurdistan. This is a late addition to the permanent bases, presumably because we are liked in Kurdistan, or liked better than we are in Sunni or Shia Iraq. And it's a crash project to build a base, but it seems to be going ahead very, very rapidly. Then the big 4, and these are places the size of small American cities. They have internal bus lines, fabulous quarters for people. In fact, there's a great competition in the military press about who has the best PX, who has the best Subway, or who has the best Burger King. Balad Air Base at its neighboring military army base, Camp Anaconda, is the 2nd most active airport on Earth today, only behind Heathrow in London. It is a huge, sprawling encampment in sort of central Sunni Iraq, north of Baghdad. Next to it, or not too far from it, is Camp Victory, which is Baghdad International Airport and surrounding environs. That includes everything from prisons to the fledgling Iraqi Air Force. It is clearly also intended to remain there for a long period of time. In the west is Al-Assad Air Base, that is in Anbar province, up near the Syrian border. Again, it is an extremely primitive country, very far separated from population centers, but the living quarters appear to be simply lavish by any international comparison or any war that anybody ever fought before. You can well imagine that the best marine duty there is to stay inside Al-Assad Air Base. Then moving further south, there's Talil Air Base, located at Nasiriyah, 2 huge long runways. It is unfortunately part also of the scandal of our treatment of the artistic heritage of Iraq. It is located more or less right next door to the Ziggurat of Ur, which is a 6th century BC building, a staged pyramid, and it's being quite badly damaged by the vibrations, things of this sort.
To illustrate what these bases look like, for starters, I want to use an example of an air base called Camp Anaconda. It's in a town called Balad, which is a little bit northeast of Baghdad, maybe 30 miles max. And it's a giant air base, big, sprawling, heavily fortified. There's 20,000 troops on this base alone. Less than 1,000 of whom ever leave the base whatsoever. So if you get sent to Iraq, you want to be on a base like Camp Anaconda because there are concrete barracks there for troops. They're air conditioned, of course. When I researched it at the time, they were preparing them to run internet lines, overseas phone lines, and cable TV lines into the troop barracks quarters. There's 2 base exchanges there where they sell all the latest high-tech gear, CDs, DVDs, TVs, DVD players, iPods, you name it. One of the base exchange managers boasted to a colleague of mine that he was happy to be selling an average of 15 TVs a day to U.S. troops there. There is a big military medical clinic there where there are 400 surgeries a month performed on U.S. troops. At that base alone, there's 250 aircraft stationed. Just at that base, there's F-16s, F-18s, Apaches, Chinooks, Kiowas, unmanned military surveillance drones, cargo planes, you name it, the whole deal, taking off and landing at all hours of the day and night.
When you read of the lavish lifestyle at, say, Al-Assad Air Base, which is just, it's what, 15 miles from the Euphrates River, but it's in an area of, there's nothing there. There are no houses, no villages. That is, in that sense, the Marine Corps put it in the right place. But when you read about how they live there, the glorious world of air conditioning, swimming pools, big screen TV, this, that, and the other thing, as well as recreational facilities, all of that's got to be trucked all the way from Kuwait. That is a long ways. It's a lot of gasoline. Moreover, they have no really intent to integrate it with the Iraqi society. We still use 110 volts, standard American electric power grids.
Also at that base, there's one thing that you can't be critical of with KBR, for example, is that they do feed the soldiers well. Now, there's a reason for this, because KBR, like the Bechtels and the other big American and other Western companies that got these no-bid contracts, is they're cost-plus fixed-fee contracts. So that means the more money they spend on the ground in Iraq doing their job, the more profit they're guaranteed. They're compensated for all that money, plus profit beyond that. That's the way the contracts are written up. And so basically, to paraphrase it, the more money you spend in Iraq as a corporation, the more you're guaranteed to make. So that's a pretty good recipe for corruption, and that's exactly what's happened. So you go into a base like this, while on forward operating bases, this won't apply, because there's times in those more combat bases where troops don't even get 3 meals a day. Maybe they won't even get a hot meal a day at times when operations are heavy. But on this base, they're served lavish meals, again, by these third country nationals.
They create a sort of a facade inside these big mess halls that make you feel like home. Baseball game on television. And at the commissary on there, you can buy DVD players, iced Starbucks double shots, other personal items, sneakers. It makes it into a little city that soldiers can come back to at night.
My point is also that this base, as I describe it, that's very, very similar as far as amenities and infrastructure of the base and the size and the number of people there as you would see in, for example, bases in Germany, American bases in Germany, American bases in Okinawa, American bases in South Korea, American bases in other parts of the Middle East. My point is, how long have those bases been there in Germany, in Okinawa, in other parts of Japan and South Korea? Well, these are the same types of bases that are being built in Iraq.
Now it turns out, we have right now, according to the Pentagon, 737 military bases in other people's countries. It's a scandal. This is that is our empire. I mean, that is, in the past, empires used to be noted in terms of colonies. Today, it's military bases, and the current number is 737. That's the Pentagon's number. It's not accurate. There's any number of bases that they don't include in the base structure report every year, but the base structure report it's an annual inventory, and it is not classified. But they do not include any of the espionage bases. They do not include any of the bases that are deeply embarrassing to us or to the regime that allowed us to build a base there. I mean, for example, our headquarters in the Middle East today is in Qatar. We don't list any of the bases in Qatar in the base structure report. Once you plot the Roman and British bases in the past, it turns out that it's about somewhere between 37 and 40 bases you need to garrison the known world. That's what the Romans had, what the British had, and about what we have in what the Defense Department calls very large bases. These are with a plant replacement value of over $1.5 billion. Kadena Air Force Base in Okinawa, Ramstein Air Base in Germany, Aviano Air Base near Venice in Italy, Diego Garcia, these places. Clearly what went into the thinking for the war against Iraq was to conquer it, to make it ours.
The reality is that whoever controls Iraq controls the world. Iraq sits on the largest world reserves of oil. When Saudi oil has long run out, when all Gulf nations are without any more petroleum resources, Iraq would still sit on a sea of oil. The country that controls Iraq is the country that will essentially get to dictate the world economy for the next generation and possibly more. So to understand the importance of Iraq in those terms is to understand why it is so important for not just the Bush administration, but for any US administration to control Iraq.
If people before the war in Iraq hated the US interventions, now people are starting to hate the US. And this is, all of these things are consequences and results of the US failed foreign policy in Iraq and Palestine and Afghanistan and Somalia and other places around the world. So you can see that this policy doesn't seem like it will change anytime soon. And the right policy that many observers and analysts have been trying to promote for is very far away. It's not even within the view of this administration or the next administrations. It's not within the view of this binary Democrat-Republican system that doesn't recognize any other alternatives than going around the world and bombing people and killing people.
If there is an intent to have a bombing raid on Iranian nuclear and military facilities, it would fit with the broader neoconservative agenda of American domination of the greater Middle East. And in that, if you look at things from that perspective, then it does make sense. I mean, it is part of a wider imperial project.
I think the message that we are sending to everyone, not just to Iran, is that the United States is an enduring presence in this part of the world. We have been here for a long time. We will be here for a long time. And everybody needs to remember that. both our friends and those who might consider themselves our adversaries.
Would we make a public declaration to the Iraqi people that we did not intend to have permanent bases? That Larry Diamond at the Hoover Institution at Stanford, who was appointed by Condoleezza Rice as her deputy, more or less, to help democratize the country. He's a specialist in democratizing countries and things of this sort. He has said repeatedly that one of the things I ask of Mr. Bremer, I ask of the military high command, that is CENTCOM, etc., how about a statement that we do not intend to build permanent bases because that is an absolute giveaway that this is an imperialist project. I mean, that's the reason it's not discussed, is that if you ever start talking about it, then you come out and said, welcome to Genghis Khan. I mean, we're expanding, and we do it using our super high-tech, unbelievably expensive military.
It's difficult, if not impossible, to know whether bases are being built. Everything up to this point for a civilian, a concerned citizen, is speculation, rumor, hearsay. The best evidence I have that some kind of permanent bases are being built are members of Congress who have been to Iraq, and at least one senator has said, yes, we are building permanent military bases. When the question is asked of senior administration officials, particularly the former Secretary of Defense Rumsfeld, one gets into semantics about what permanent is. And I define permanent as pouring concrete and welding steel to distinguish a base from tents and ditch latrines.
I believe the reason for this policy of classification, but it's not really a policy, it's not really classification, it's just a studious refusal to discuss the issue. And clearly it's gone out throughout the Pentagon, throughout the world of embassies around the world, through the bases. Don't talk about permanent bases.
If they are being built, they can be built out of presidential and Defense Department contingency funds, which run into the hundreds of millions of dollars. I think the Pentagon can say, our soldiers have been there 5 years. They can't keep living in tents. We have to have some kind of barracks, even if we're just there 6 months, 12 months, and this is for the comfort of the troops. All kinds of reasons, if you will, or excuses can be given.
The subject of Iraq is a matter of imperialism. It's not spreading democracy. It's not saving Israel. We've, if anything, probably put Israel in a much more dangerous position by enhancing the power of Shia Islam and Iran. I mean, that is the winners so far in this totally bungled operation are clearly Shia Islam, and that this is alarming to the Israelis. The issues posed by your program and the clandestine building of huge permanent enclaves in Iraq are who's in charge, is there any oversight, and the nature of our democracy and our separation of powers, that it looks like the political system has failed badly.
The politics in Washington can be rough, but make no mistake about it, I am determined to succeed, and we will implement a plan to achieve victory, which is necessary, and that they need to tell the troops that no matter how tough it looks here in the nation's capital, that I know we're doing the right thing, and I know we'll win.
And why are these types of bases being constructed in Iraq? Why don't we have more temporary things that theoretically, if we listen to the propaganda out of the Bush administration, okay, we're going to leave when the job is done, whatever that means, whatever the job exactly is, whatever they define victory as. But the point is they're not going to leave, because if you look at where these bases, as I said before, there's at least one in the south near the Basra oil field, which is the biggest one in the country. There's two up in the Kurdish-controlled north, which is where the second largest known oil field is.
As the policy we see extending currently, how can United States, if you believe that the situation is grim in Iraq, there's no solution to it, Even if we want to pull out, we have to leave our bases there to monitor what might happen. So there are no pipelines are not blown up. So there is no more civil war between the Shiites and the Sunnis and the Kurds, so that the flow of oil is not interrupted. You got to have monitoring positions. Of course, we have that in Qatar, we have it in Bahrain, Saudi Arabia, Kuwait, the Emirates, the Persian Gulf, our flotilla is there, and the Mediterranean. But and in Afghanistan, if we have it in Georgia, we have it in Azerbaijan. I mean, the whole place is jam-packed with our bases.
So what are the odds, say a year down the road, if, for example, peace were to come to Iraq? Let's just pretend it's not going to happen as long as the Americans are there, but let's pretend that that happened and things started to stabilize. What are the odds that the U.S. military commander of one of those bases is going to say, well, okay, Iraqis, you know, looks like our job's done here. Here's the keys. Enjoy the movie theater. Have fun in the swimming pool. You know, enjoy your democracy. Take care. It's just not going to happen, is my point. These are billion-dollar bases. They're mega bases. They're permanent bases, and they're there absolutely to stay.
I think the message that we are sending to everyone, not just to Iran, is that the United States is an enduring presence in this part of the world. We have been here for a long time. We will be here for a long time. And everybody needs to remember that, both our friends and those who might consider themselves our adversaries.